Hey, welcome back. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is The Great Conversation. So, I have a confession to make. When I first moved to New York, I was terrified of the subway. Not the crowds or the delays, but the simple act of getting on the wrong train. I'd stand there, staring at the map, convinced that one misstep would send me hurtling into some unknown, chaotic territory. And I think that's how a lot of us have been taught to see the Vikings. A terrifying, chaotic force that suddenly erupts onto the map of medieval Europe, all horned helmets and indiscriminate slaughter, sending civilization itself screeching to a halt before mysteriously vanishing. But what if that map is wrong? What if we've been reading the history of these people entirely backwards? Today, on The Great Conversation, we're issuing a Viking apology. We're going to rethink the so-called Dark Age raiders, not to whitewash the very real violence of their raids, but to understand the profound complexity and influence of a civilization that was so much more than its battle axes. We're going to see them not as a sudden, inexplicable disaster, but as a pivotal thread in the tapestry of the world we live in now. Let's start by dismantling the single biggest myth, the horns. I'm sorry to say it, but there is zero archaeological evidence for horn helmets. That was an invention of 19th century romantic opera, believe it or not. The Vikings themselves were far more practical. They were masters of the ship, the drakkar, a technological marvel of the age. These were shallow draft vessels that could cross the open ocean but also sail far up rivers, making them the ultimate tool for trade, exploration, and yes, for lightning-fast raids. They weren't mindless barbarians. They were brilliant naval engineers and opportunistic strategists. They saw the fractured kingdoms of Europe, rich with monastic treasure that was often poorly defended, and they saw a business model. A brutal, terrifying one, but a calculated one. The raid on Lindisfarne in 793, that shocking event that heralded the Viking Age in the history books, wasn't the beginning of a mindless spree. It was a targeted strike on a node of immense wealth and spiritual power. It was a statement. And this is where our apology deepens. Because to define the Norse world solely by these raids is to miss the vast, vibrant society back home. Think of them not as a roaming gang, but as a culture with a rich legal system, the thing, where free men gathered to debate and settle disputes. They had a breathtakingly complex mythology, a world of gods bound by fate, of cosmic trees and wolves that chased the sun. Their poetry, the skaldic verse, was a dense, intricate art form of kennings, calling a ship the sea steed, or blood the battle dew. This is not the culture of simple thugs. They were farmers, merchants, poets, and explorers with a worldview that valued courage, sure, but also cunning, hospitality, and a fierce sense of personal honor. Which brings us to their greatest and most overlooked role as connectors. The Vikings were the supreme networkers of the early medieval world. While the raids on England and France grabbed the headlines, their other routes tell a different story. Look east. They sailed the rivers of what is now Russia, all the way down to the Black Sea and Constantinople, which they called Miklagard, the Great City. They established trade routes that linked the silver of the Islamic caliphates with the furs and amber of the frozen north. In fact, so many Norse traders and mercenaries were in the east that they left behind inscriptions, runestones in Sweden that talk of men who died in Sörkland, the land of the Saracens. They weren't just taking, they were trading, interacting, and facilitating a cross-continental exchange of goods and ideas. And look west, to their settlements. They didn't just loot Ireland. They founded Dublin, a major trading port. They didn't just terrorize the coast of France. They settled and became the Normans, who would later reshape the history of England and Sicily. And of course, they sailed into the unknown Atlantic, settling Iceland, founding the Parliament of the Althing, one of the world's oldest democratic assemblies. And then, of course, they pushed further, to Greenland, and finally to the shores of North America, to a place they called Vinland, centuries before Columbus. This isn't the story of destroyers. This is the story of some of history's most daring colonists and explorers. So why the bad reputation? Well, to paraphrase the old saying, history is written by the monks who got raided. Our primary written sources for the early Viking Age come from the chronicles of the very monastic communities that were their targets. Imagine your only source for a biography was written by your worst enemy. you'd probably come off looking pretty one-dimensional, too. The Norse themselves left behind runestones and sagas, but those were written down later, often in Christianized times. The contemporary voice of the Viking, in their own defense, is largely silent in the written record. We have to listen to them through their archaeology, their ship burials, their jewelry, their settlements from Newfoundland to Kiev. I find myself reflecting on this as someone who has moved between worlds. I grew up with the stories of the Bengali Baols, the wandering mystic minstrels, and later immersed myself in the high-tech grids of engineering. We all contain multitudes. The Vikings force us to confront that same complexity in history. A man could be a peaceful farmer in Stavanger for most of the year, and then a raider on the shores of Northumbria the next. A woman in a Norse settlement could be a weaver, a brewer, and hold significant legal rights to divorce and property, even as her culture's stories glorified battle. They could compose exquisite, sorrowful poetry about the loss of a son, and also practice slavery. Holding these contradictions in our mind is the hard, necessary work of understanding history. It's uncomfortable, but it's real. So, what's our takeaway from this apology? It's this: the Dark Ages were never dark. They were simmering with movement, connection, and transformation. The Vikings weren't a meteor that struck Europe and left a crater. They were a catalyst. They forced kingdoms to consolidate, to build navies, to fortify towns. They connected disparate economies from the Arctic to the Mediterranean. They settled empty lands and carried new ideas, technologies, and genes across the globe. In a very real sense, the world of medieval trade, of fortified cities, of interconnected European kingdoms, was shaped in the forge of the Viking Age. They remind us that history is rarely a simple story of civilized versus barbarian. It is a messy, interconnected, and deeply human story of adaptation, ambition, and the eternal search for a better life. Whether that means plundering a monastery, trading for silk in Baghdad, or farming the rocky shores of a newfound land. The next time you hear the word Viking, I hope you'll picture not just a longship, but a marketplace. Not just a raid, but a trade route. Not just an end, but a beginning. Thank you for joining me for this conversation. If this new perspective resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd share this episode with a friend who loves history. You can find more deep dives into the threads that weave our world together at Light Not Studios, online at lightnotstudios.com. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi. Until next time, keep listening and keep questioning the map.